I feel like we take for granted the fantastic version of Android that we have today. Sure, it has its pitfalls and some flavours are somewhat better than others, but it used to be a whole lot worse, and that's something I want to discuss today. Hey guys, I'm Ryan Thomas, and do you remember when Android used to look like this? Some to this day still believe that Android is this cheap, nasty alternative to a fleshed out and polished iOS. That's kind of hard to say with a straight face right now. But this reputation didn't come from nowhere. The software system we enjoy now today on our smartphones is a far cry from the absolute cluster that ran on devices 13 to 14 years ago. And I think it's worth taking a look back at what feels like an eternity, to be honest, to really appreciate the superb operating system that we have and use today. By the way guys, really trying to hit 500,000 subscribers. If you wouldn't mind hitting that button, it would help us out. Thank you very much. Early Android was like a bit of a wild west. We didn't have the insane long-term software support that we enjoy on devices today. We didn't have nearly as many features and options, and it was sort of up to the individual phone manufacturer to come up with something that uniquely represented the hardware that it ran on. The Xperia X10 really stands out to me in that series of smartphone as a great example of early Android looking and feeling really strange, with the legendary Xperia Play being a personal favourite of mine. The likes of this and HTC's Wildfire ran Android 2 Gingerbread, and despite this, you can see there are clear differences already in the interface. But what stands out at this time is stylization, the skeuomorphism and character that a lot of these earlier devices came with. I love the aesthetic of this time, even if there's nowhere near as much breadth, depth and fine detail as we have now. Android really tried to tie this down with a more readable and modern looking format with 4.0 Ice Cream Sandwich. Following Honeycomb, this new generation OS interface used Holo, Android's collection of design principles for the time. A strange sort of mix of skeuomorphism that had come before, and then sort of fruity aero type elements added in there as well. In the demonstration presentation actually, alongside the Samsung Galaxy Nexus launch, who remembers that beast by the way, there was a focus on simplicity without sterility. The Roboto font was developed as a typeface built for high resolution displays, such as the 720p one we had in the Galaxy Nexus, and was used throughout this version of ICS shipping on that device. It might be a long distant relative, but I kind of believe the underlying theme and design philosophy of this can somewhat be found in the Android 16 OS we have right now. Google has consistently made its versions of the OSs simple, where others have taken the Android base and built other interfaces on top that historically have somewhat complicated things and added other features. These are, in my opinion, responsible for that sort of rocky reputation that Android once had in its formative years, and that some to this day still believe in. Software at the time of Ice Cream Sandwich and KitKat not only used outdated styling by today's standards, but I believe what also went against it is its fractured and incohesive design aesthetic. Heaps of mismatched colours, textures, icon shapes, almost like taking completely different design philosophies and packing it all into one OS. And it made for what feels now like more of a mishmash of design elements compared to the continuous themed icons, shapes, fonts, colours. Software today feels a lot more cohesive in design language, not only in sort of the stock included system applications, but in third-party apps as well. It feels like there's been a framework put in place for those versus the totally blank canvas and open design of what we had in the early 2010s. Android KitKat, which ran on the Nexus 5 until a later update, refined things and started to build a bit of a base for clean, simple design. Actually, one of the biggest features that some Android fans, including myself, reminisce about to this day is the wonderful full screen transformation that took the cover art, whatever music you were listening to at the time, and pushed it corner to corner on your lock screen. KitKat also took Google Now, the built-in engine designed to sort of predict what information the user would want and then display that, along with having built-in voice recognition for search. This is arguably the sort of genesis for what we have now with Google Gemini, though of course structurally and technically they are very, very different pieces. But it was Android 5.0 Lollipop that made major surface level changes. It's been over 10 years now since Android 5.0 launched, with a major shake-up in material design. This moved on from the hollow era and went arguably a little bit too far into the simplistic, clear and modern looking approach, depending on who you ask of course. There were fewer gradients, smaller icons, it removed borders, a lot of the transparency, and it made the interface look a lot flatter for want of a better word, with no better example perhaps being the updated keyboard without its buttons. The notification shade, quick settings drawers, the recents menu, they all show this difference off in a little bit more of an impactful way. This flatter and more modern look to things actually lasted a very long time, deep into the Google Pixel line of devices, which of course succeeded the more niche Google Nexus line that was perhaps a little more enthusiast focused. I personally spent all night one time flashing my Nexus 4 to Lollipop manually just so that I could get that fresh new aesthetic. But funnily enough, many actually believe 5.0 Lollipop to be one of the worst updates, with Marshmallow 6.0 coming in to sort of button up the functionality and refine the aesthetic that was introduced with 5.0. And it really didn't take long for all of these changes to have a major effect on the whole smartphone industry. The transition from the likes of TouchWiz to Samsung Experience to One UI was only actually a couple of years. The TouchWiz, LG UI, HTC Sense era of software design, whilst it was bold, it was kind of muddled and overwhelming, and it seemed to disappear quite quickly for something a lot cleaner looking and less cumbersome. I actually think OnePlus might have had a bit of an impact with this using its earlier versions of software that were essentially just CyanogenMod. It ran close enough to near stock Android with a few little tweaks that really helped the user experience. That's almost exactly how Pixel Experience is today, though with a bit more of a design twist with Material 3 Expressive. Ironically actually, that software appeal from OnePlus has somewhat disappeared since the company decided to mirror image its Oppo Color OS from the sister company, a decision that has forced some loyal customers to jump ship from OnePlus in search of a more reliable and clean interface. I know it probably sounds dull and boring to hear me say, don't take things for granted, but Android has become so good in the last few years that for me at least, it comfortably outclasses iOS in design, usability, features, quality and density of those. With the incredible hardware that we are treated to these days as well, we really do have it great. And all it takes is a brief look at what we had to put up with 15 years ago to really cement that fact. Android is incredibly mature as a product and as a piece of software in 2025, and is thankfully light years improved on the once mishmash and dog mess that we had with some examples of Android prior. The OS that was initially conceived as one designed for cameras not only changed course with its move to mobile, but is more than I'm sure any of the original designers could ever have imagined. And that's pretty cool if you ask me. What's your version of Android, and how many of you remember when Android did used to look like this? I mean, I ran heaps of phones in this era. My particular favourite's probably the Xperia X10 Mini, Mini Pro actually, I had the keyboard, and the ZTE Orange San Francisco, and then later the Galaxy Nexus and the Nexus 4. Let me know which device from this era you ran and which version of Android you were particularly most fond of. And what actually are you running today? Because I think that would be quite an interesting comparison. Anyway, whilst you're down there in the comments, be sure to hit like if you enjoyed today's content and subscribe to never miss another upload. Thank you all so much for watching. I've been Ryan Thomas and I will catch you later. Cheers.